You ever notice how war doesn't always start with explosions? Sometimes it starts with something quieter, more subtle, like the hollow ding of a doorbell on a Tuesday morning. That's how it began for my grandfather. I was staying with him for the summer, helping out, spending time, learning how to fix things with duct tape and patience. He's not the kind of man who raises his voice. Never was. You wouldn't look at him and see danger. You'd see an old man in flannel, sipping black coffee on the porch swing he built himself 50 years ago. But that morning, something in the air shifted. The sky was gray, not stormy, just undecided, like it was waiting for someone else to make the first move. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m., not early enough to feel urgent, but early enough to feel disrespectful. Grandpa didn't even flinch, just kept reading his paper like whoever was out there didn't exist. "I'll get it," I said, already halfway to the door. I opened it, and what I saw nearly made me laugh out loud. If it hadn't been so absurd. 3 people stood on the front steps, all wearing matching khaki vests with iron-on patches that read, HOA Enforcement Team. One had a clipboard, one had a tape measure, and the third, God help us, was wearing mirrored sunglasses and what looked like a security badge made on a kid's label printer. "Good morning," said the one with the clipboard. A wiry woman with sharp angles and a voice like a cold cup of coffee. "We're here on behalf of the HOA. We need to inspect the premises for visual compliance." I blinked. Visual compliance? Your grandfather has been issued 3 citations in the last month. Failure to mow within HOA-regulated intervals. Unapproved front porch furniture. And yesterday, we received a complaint about noise. I glanced over my shoulder. Grandpa was still on the porch, legs crossed, newspaper up like a shield. The old wind chimes above him clinked in the breeze. "Noise?" I asked. "You mean the chimes?" She checked her clipboard like it was a holy book. Also a record player playing non-approved genres after 6 p.m. It was jazz. Aggressive jazz. I stared daher, waiting for a smirk. Punchline. But no, she was dead serious. "Jazz, that was the crime. We're going to need access to the backyard," she continued, stepping forward. I moved to block her. "I don't think so. We have the authority," she said. "No," came a voice behind me, deep and gravelly, calm, unshakable. Grandpa had put down the paper. He stood now on the porch steps, one hand in the pocket of his old flannel, the other resting gently on the rail. "No, you don't," he said again. The woman narrowed her eyes. "Sir, refusal to comply will result in escalating action." Grandpa didn't blink. "You want to escalate something? Start by bringing a real badge." Silence stretched like a tightrope between us. Then, with the confidence only a man who's seen real war can possess, Grandpa turned and walked back into the house. The fake enforcers stood frozen for a moment. The one with the sunglasses muttered something under his breath and looked genuinely uncertain for the first time. I closed the door, and that's when I realized this wasn't about grass height or wind chimes. Not really. This was something else. And my grandfather, who never raised his voice, never stirred trouble, had just declared a quiet kind of war. But what they didn't know yet, he wasn't alone. After that morning, the HOA goon squad didn't come back right away. But the letters did. Typed, printed, sealed with official-looking logos that looked more like props from a bad legal drama than anything remotely binding. Grandpa would collect them from the mailbox, scan them for exactly 2 seconds, then toss them in a drawer labeled, "Junk that thinks it's important." That drawer was almost full now. The thing is, I didn't understand him at first. I was raised to follow the rules. Sign where you're told. Mow your lawn every Saturday. Don't talk back to people with clipboards. But Grandpa? He didn't play by those rules. And the neighborhood knew it. They called him the holdout, the last original homeowner on the block. Everyone else had bought into the HOA cult years ago, agreeing to pastel shutters, regulation mulch, and fences that couldn't be too high, too low, or too expressive. But Grandpa's house? It was different. It looked lived in, real. The paint was slightly faded. The porch was hand-built. And the lawn? Wild in the way a meadow is wild. alive, intentional, beautiful in its rebellion. I asked him once why he never joined the HOA. He took a long sip of his coffee and said, "You don't put a leash on something that built the road." That didn't make sense to me then. Not fully. But that week I started to understand. I found it by accident. I was in the garage, digging for the lawn clippers, when I knocked over an old ammo box. Heavy, dented, labeled in black marker. Camp Echo, do not open unless you mean it. Inside, newspaper clippings, yellowed photographs, a crumpled deployment order. And at the bottom, a service plaque. His name engraved beneath it. Chief Warrant Officer, U.S. Army Special Forces, retired. It hit me like a punch. I knew Grandpa was a vet. I just didn't know what kind of vet. I brought it up over dinner. He didn't deny it. Didn't brag either. Just nodded once and said, "We did things quiet. That's how we kept people alive." Then he looked out the window toward the street. The street that used to be nothing but dirt and trees when he bought this house. Before the cul-de-sac. Before the beige paint and artificial turf. "Silence ain't weakness, kid," he said. "It's just a loaded chamber waiting to choose its moment." That night he opened the drawer. The one with all the HOA letters. And he started sorting them. Not reading. Studying. He moved like someone planning something. I should have been scared. But I wasn't. I felt something else. Anticipation. Because if those fake HOA cops thought Grandpa was just another grumpy retiree with bad knees and lawn opinions, they were about to learn what a real operation looks like. The next morning, he asked me to help him bring something up from the basement. "Which box?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just handed me a key. We went down the creaking steps, past the old Christmas lights and tax folders, to a door I'd never seen open before. When it swung open, I saw it. Blueprints, communication gear, a cork board with names, dates, and surveillance photos. HOA committee members circled in red. One name double-circled. Margot Bleeker, HOA president. And in the center, like a crown jewel, a photo of Grandpa at a barbecue, surrounded by a dozen other retirees, veterans, engineers, former federal employees, neighbors. And suddenly I got it. This wasn't just resistance. This was recruitment. "Operation Sundown," Grandpa said. "Time to get the old crew back together." The first thing Grandpa did was bring out the burner phones. Not smartphones. Not anything with a touchscreen. No, these were old school, flip-open Nokias from a locked case labeled, "In case of HOA overreach." I don't know what shook me more. The fact that he had them, or that the case looked like it hadn't been touched in over a decade, but was still dust-free, prepped, and ready. He handed one to me. "Don't use it unless you hear the phrase Tulip Protocol." What the hell is Tulip Protocol? You'll know if it happens. That was how I realized I was no longer just a summer guest. I'd been drafted. That week, the house became different. Neighbors started stopping by. People I'd never noticed before. A man who always wore a fishing hat but hadn't touched a rod in years. A retired librarian who'd once done signals intelligence in Berlin. A grandmother who could make banana bread and disable a drone with her knitting needle. Each had a code name. Hawk, Dandelion, Gearbox. Each brought something. Schematics, printed HOA bylaws, long-forgotten neighborhood maps. Some brought old grievances. Others brought cookies. All of them brought resolve. The thing was, the HOA wasn't really about rules. It was about power. Power through order. Through silence. Through intimidation disguised as civility. They underestimated how many of the original residents had lived under far worse regimes. The turning point came on a Thursday. We intercepted a fake compliance notice slipped under the door of Mr. Huang's house. He was 84, nearly blind, and still sharp enough to fix a radio with tweezers. The letter accused him of repetitive cultural decor inconsistent with neighborhood tradition. It was a coded dig at the small paper lanterns he hung for Lunar New Year. That was the line. That night, the kitchen filled with low voices and clinking mugs. Plans were drawn. I watched Grandpa shift into something I hadn't seen before. Something fluent in coordination and consequence. It was eerie. Precise. Beautiful. At 0600 the next morning, a red wagon full of paper lanterns appeared in front of Margot Bleeker's mailbox. By 0700, every mailbox in the neighborhood had one attached, including hers. Neatly looped. Silent. Glowing at dawn. She couldn't punish one house. Not legally. And that was the point. The HOA board didn't know what hit them. They tried door-to-door intimidation, but no one answered. They tried mailing citations, but got dozens of identical reply letters signed only, "Concerned Citizens of Block Echo." Grandpa grinned when he read them. "We're not at war," he said. "We're staging an awakening." And yet, the HOA started escalating. New uniforms, reflective vests, neighborhood safety patrol patches sewn crookedly onto surplus windbreakers. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened next. It was Sunday, the day of the monthly Community Harmony Inspection Walk. Margot led her little parade of clipboard crusaders down the block, chins high, hands tight, measuring tape dangling like a sheriff's pistol. They rounded the corner to find every original homeowner, nearly 20 in total, standing silently on their front lawns. No signs.
No eslogans.
Just presence. Grandpa stood in front of his house, flannel pressed, boots planted. Mr. Huang stood with him, holding a lantern. Even Mrs. Abrams, 91, in a wheelchair and an oxygen tank, had her son roll her out so she could sit beside her mailbox like a sentinel of forgotten justice. Not a word was spoken. Not a rule was broken. But the HOA patrol stopped dead in their tracks. Margot stammered something about unauthorized assembly, about procedure, about visual uniformity. But nobody moved. They were surrounded by silence, not empty, not afraid, determined. And for the first time since she took over, Margot looked unsure. That's when I knew. The neighborhood wasn't hers anymore. It never really was. It was 5:48 a.m. when we heard the tires. Unmarked white van. No license plates. No company logo. Just plain panels and tinted windows, rolling slow through the neighborhood like a shark circling a reef. I was already up. Grandpa was brewing coffee. We both heard it at the same time. He didn't say a word. Just set the mug down and opened the drawer by the door. The one labeled Plan B. Inside, a radio, a laminated map, and a rusted brass whistle I'd never seen him wear before. He slipped it around his neck. "They're moving to phase 2, he said. "Which is covert enforcement.
Surveillance.
Threat simulation. But not real muscle, just theater." The van parked across the street. 3 men got out. Not cops. Not anything legal. Just big guys in matching vests labeled Neighborhood Compliance Response Team like they'd been hired off Craigslist and handed clipboards. One had a body cam. Another had a GoPro duct taped to a bicycle helmet. The third, tall, bald, way too into it, held a rolled-up document tube like it was a search warrant. They crossed the street. Didn't knock. Just walked up and started taking photos of the porch, the gutters, the mailbox like they were documenting a crime scene. Grandpa stepped outside. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. "State your purpose," he said. Helmet guy grinned. "Routine compliance sweep. This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. It is under Community Oversight Authority, as defined in Resolution 4B. Grandpa tilted his head. "There is no Resolution 4B. That proposal was tabled." "I was there." Helmet guy blinked. "You were there." "I chaired that vote," Grandpa said, and his voice dropped. Quiet but sharp enough to cut steel. 15 years ago. You're quoting a bylaw that never passed." Clipboard guy stepped forward. "Sir, if you do not comply, we will be forced to initiate a documentation breach protocol." I almost laughed. Documentation breach protocol? Who were these guys? Former mall cops who failed upward? Then they tried to open the gate. That was their mistake. The second the latch clicked, something moved across the street. A flash of silver. Then 2 more. Neighbors. 3 of them in matching windbreakers but not HOA issued. These were homemade. Stitched badges. Retired military patches. Quiet eyes. One of them had a camcorder older than me. the kind you have to hoist onto your shoulder. They began recording. The HOA squad hesitated. "Back away from the property," said a new voice. Low, calm, measured. Mrs. Santiago, 73 years old. Retired sheriff's deputy. Known for baking pies that could shut a man up for an hour. Also known, apparently, for still having contacts at the local precinct. She stepped onto the sidewalk and held up a badge. "Real one. Unless you have a warrant issued by a judge and processed by the county," she said, "you're trespassing." That's when the bald one, the only one dumb enough to think this was still salvageable, reached for something in his belt pouch. Grandpa moved like gravity forgot him. 1 second he was on the porch, the next he was by the gate, hand on the man's wrist. Not violent, not fast, just final. Bald guy flinched, dropped the pouch. Out spilled nothing but tape measures and printed citations. The neighbors closed in. The camera kept rolling. They backed off, back into the van. No words.
No paperwork.
Just shame. And for the second time in a week, the HOA got chased off their own turf. That night, Grandpa didn't say much. Just sat on the porch with the others. They were sipping coffee, watching the street.
No chairs. No celebration.
Just quiet satisfaction. "We're not trying to win," he told me later. "We're trying to remind them who we are." The morning started like any other. Sky clear, coffee hot. Grandpa reading the paper with his slippers perfectly aligned beneath him like always. And then came the rumble. Engines. Not one. Not two. 4. White pickups. Orange lights. Trailer in tow. And at the center of it all, Margot Bleecker, HOA president, emerging like a villain in a low-budget superhero film. Hair helmet styled. Clipboard gripped like a sword. Her vest read, "Enforcement Commander, Tier 1. This was no visit. This was an operation." They rolled past the neighborhood slowly, tires crunching like bones. A sign hung on the side of one truck.
Mandatory Struktural Compliance Initiative.
Translation: Demolition. The trailer carried a mini excavator. Behind it, a small generator, a drone launcher, even a goddamn folding watchtower. "I didn't know the HOA had a budget for tactical surveillance," I muttered. Grandpa didn't even flinch. He just stood, folded the paper, and walked inside. That's when they dropped it, the final notice. Nailed to the gate like they were reenacting the HOA version of Martin Luther's 95 Theses. Notice of forced correction. Unauthorized structures. Per Clause 9.8, Section J, demolition will proceed unless compliance is achieved immediately. There was no appeal, no hearing, no law behind it, just threat. They powered up the mini excavator. Grandpa stepped back outside. Only this time he wasn't alone. From across the street, Mr. Huang wheeled out a cart. To the left, Mrs. Santiago stood by the fire hydrant, walkie-talkie in hand, a sheriff's department jacket zipped halfway up, and behind them, everyone, 27 households, veterans, teachers, a retired fire marshal, a woman who used to work counterintelligence for the NSA, every one of them holding a phone, recording. Then Grandpa pulled the tarp off the sign on our lawn, a sign that read, "We, the founding residents of East Briar Glen, do hereby declare this property a legacy lot protected by Article 3 of the City Preservation Statute 14b. Margot's smug started to crack. "You have no authority to." A voice cut in, calm, southern, official. "Actually, they do." A man stepped out of a black SUV that had just pulled up. City Council seal on the door. Gold badge on the chest. Councilman Roberts. A longtime friend of Mr. Huang. He held up a folder. "This neighborhood's original zoning charter predates the HOA's founding by 12 years. And this house," he pointed at ours,
Teshkalili registered as a municipal landmark.
"Any attempt to alter, demolish, or otherwise interfere with the property is a felony. You didn't check the land titles, Margot." Her face went slack. "You came to destroy a porch," he continued, "and you nearly committed a criminal trespass with heavy machinery on a federally recognized veterans' residence. The drone sputtered midair and crashed into a bush. Margot stammered, turning toward her team, but they were already backing away. One guy tossed his clipboard like it was radioactive. Then Grandpa stepped forward.
No anger.
Just steal. You thought I was quiet because I was afraid. But silence isn't fear, Margot. It's discipline. He turned and looked across the crowd. I built this house with my hands, served my country, buried my wife right in that garden. You came for my porch. You tried to erase a lifetime. And now you've lost this neighborhood forever. Margot opened her mouth, then closed it, because there was nothing left to say. She climbed into her truck and drove off without another word. We never saw her again. The HOA board resigned a week later. Every last one of them. It's been 3 months. The porch still stands. The wind chimes still sing. Grandpa still drinks his coffee in silence. But now, every Saturday morning, a group of neighbors joins him, just sitting, sipping, letting the world turn without interference. Because when you underestimate the quiet ones, you forget. They don't need to shout to win. Sometimes they just wait, together,